Imagine this. A calm, determined man in a wheelchair rolls up to a public sidewalk, camera in hand, ready to exercise his constitutional rights. What happens next is a jaw-dropping clash between an everyday citizen and law enforcement officers who may not have anticipated what was coming. In today's video, we follow a disabled man who refuses to back down when confronted by police. Despite their attempts to demand his ID and challenge his right to film in public, he stands firm, calmly asserting his First Amendment rights. The tension builds as the officers struggle to justify their actions. But this man's knowledge of the law turns the tables in a way you won't believe. How does this bold encounter end? Will the officers respect his rights, or will it escalate further? Stay tuned to see how one man's courage leaves a lasting impression. As the man adjusts his camera and steadies his voice, the officers begin to question him. "What's your name? Can we see some ID?" They ask, their tone firm but not overly aggressive. The man, unfazed, responds calmly, "Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" It's a simple question, but it catches the officers off guard. They glance at each other, clearly unsure of how to proceed. This wasn't his first encounter like this. Over the years, he had taken the time to educate himself about his rights, determined not to let his disability become a reason for others to underestimate him. He knew the law, and he knew when it was being overstepped. The sidewalk he was standing on was public property, and filming in public spaces was entirely within his rights. Yet the officers seemed intent on asserting their authority, creating a tense standoff that was far from over. The officers, growing visibly frustrated, tried a different approach. One of them leaned in and said, "We're just trying to make sure everything's okay here. People called us because you seemed suspicious." But the man didn't flinch. "Suspicious for what?" "Exercising my rights in public," he asked, his voice steady. He knew that vague terms like suspicious often masked an attempt to intimidate or justify overreach. Around them, a few bystanders had started to gather, quietly observing the scene. Some whispered to each other, while others recorded on their phones. The man couldn't help but notice the shift in energy. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was becoming a moment where the public could witness the importance of standing firm against unlawful demands. The officers exchanged a quick glance, clearly aware they were being watched. Their next move would be critical, and the man braced himself for whatever came next. The tension was palpable as one of the officers took a step closer. "If you don't identify yourself, we might have to escalate this," he said, his tone carrying a mix of authority and uncertainty. The man adjusted his position, making sure the camera was capturing everything. "Am I breaking any laws? You're the ones escalating. I'm just standing on public property, documenting what I see." The crowd around them grew larger, with murmurs of support beginning to surface. "He's right," someone in the back said. The officers were now visibly uncomfortable, aware that every word and movement was being scrutinized. Yet they didn't back down. "If you have nothing to hide, why not just cooperate?" the second officer asked, his voice more measured. The man took a deep breath. "Rights aren't something I need to prove to you. They're guaranteed." The officers hesitated, the weight of the moment closing in on all sides. Just as the standoff seemed to reach a stalemate, a voice cut through the tension from the crowd. "I'm an attorney. He's within his rights." All eyes shifted to a man stepping forward, dressed in casual clothes, but carrying himself with confidence. The officers froze for a moment, clearly caught off guard. The attorney continued, "Unless you have reasonable suspicion of a crime, you can't demand ID. And if you escalate without cause, you're opening yourselves up to legal action." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The man in the wheelchair, still calm, gave a small nod of thanks to his unexpected ally. The crowd buzzed with whispers, their interest now even more piqued. One of the officers, perhaps realizing the situation was slipping from their control, spoke into his radio, calling for backup. The attorney turned to the man and said quietly, "Stay calm. They're trying to intimidate you, but you're in the right." The stakes had just been raised. As backup arrived, two more officers stepped out of their vehicle, surveying the scene. One of them, clearly a higher-ranking official, approached the group. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp but professional. The first officers quickly explained, painting the man in the wheelchair as uncooperative. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and the attorney stepped forward again. "He's done nothing wrong. He's exercising his First Amendment rights, and your officers are harassing him without cause." The senior officer glanced at the man, the attorney, and the growing crowd, then asked calmly, "Sir, are you filming on public property?" The man nodded. "Yes, I am." After a brief pause, the senior officer said, "Then you're free to continue. You're not required to provide ID." Relief swept through the crowd, but before anyone could celebrate, the senior officer turned to the original pair. "We'll discuss this later," he said firmly, leaving them visibly uneasy. As the police dispersed, the man looked into his camera. "This is why we stand up for our rights," he said. The crowd cheered, but the final twist came when the attorney handed him a card. "Call me if they give you trouble again," he said with a knowing smile, walking away as quietly as he had arrived. As the crowd began to disperse, a sense of accomplishment filled the air. The man in the wheelchair looked around, grateful for the support from strangers who had stood by him. "This isn't just about me," he said into the camera. "It's about all of us knowing and protecting our rights, no matter who we are or where we come from." The officers who had caused the conflict left the scene quietly, their earlier confidence replaced by visible unease. The senior officer's intervention had not only resolved the moment, but also served as a reminder that accountability matters at every level. The man packed up his camera, thanked the bystanders, and rolled away, a quiet determination in his eyes. The attorney's card remained tucked in his hand, a symbol of unexpected support, and a reminder that standing up for what's right often inspires others to do the same. Rights defended, story told.